Hello, it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and we're ready to go with day 2. And during day 2, I'm a little bit flustered because I just dropped an open-faced sandwich upside down on the floor. So hopefully things will go better now. So for day 2, we are going to do everything on the outside layers here. And I don't know if there's anything special I have to tell you. We are going to put on this bee butt here, and this goes on the flaps, so we'll do that later on too, but that's the special hardware we used for this one. And what else are we going to do with this one? Oh yes, on this one we're going to do the straps and the Chicago screws. You might not have them on yours because maybe you're making one that's got the panel to show off on the front of yours, right? So we're going to continue on with all the outside pieces like the pocket and the D-rings or gusset tabs, or the gusset hardware that you need. Okay, so remember, if you have any questions, you can ask in the Lányos Handmade Pattern Party group, or you can ask here, and I'll get right back to you. So let's get sewing. Now we've got our pocket piece to deal with here. I don't know if you do it this way or not, but I usually cut a little triangle out of the pattern piece, and I just line it up and mark it, and it ends up working out okay. Then I can squish it together and sew it. So that's how I stick the darts in. Okay, so I'm just going to put in 4 darts and then we'll move on to the next piece. So here I have my darts in, and eventually these pieces, the lining and the outer layer, are going to go together like this. So I want to make sure, I'm going to base these down, and I want to have one facing one way and one the other way so they fit together really nice when I'm finally putting these 2 pieces together. So right now I'm going to make sure that I base this down this way and this one down this way, if I can get my fingers around it. And then with this one, I'll do the same thing, make this out and make this in, and they'll fit together nice. I'm just going to put a clip here so I can mark which way I want this to go, and I'm just going to baste around here to make it sit down. With this one, I could press it with an iron, but of course the vinyl I can't. And next, right sides together. Let's put this seam together. And we are going to sew our 1/2-inch seam allowance across here. So now we've got our seam sewn, and we are going to put on some snaps. Now, don't put this together and edge stitch it yet. I like to have it flat so I can measure down for my magnetic snap. So I'm putting this one on this side, and this one does not go on this side. These 2 things are not going to match up with each other. This one's going to match up with the body of your bag. So that's where the other half of it goes, which we don't have here yet. And this one is going to have the butt of my clasp. So you will put a magnetic snap on here, either the clasp or the snap. And the snap is going to be a female half, because the male half is going to be on the bag flap. So this snap belongs to something else, and this snap belongs to something else. Or the bee butt belongs to something else. We're going to put this on the bag flap. So for now, let's just measure this one out. And it's 1/2 inch down from the fold in the center, which I've marked here. So I'm going to put the top of my snap here. I'm going to draw little lines where I can poke this open. And I'm going to draw, those look really wide. Oh well. And I'm going to put little lines on this to reinforce it too. Now, since this is fabric this side, we can fuse this on here. but we can't do any fusing on the vinyl. So I'm going to poke these holes through there, and then poke them through there, and then attach this and bend the prongs down. I will use the fusible side against the fabric. But before you poke anything, double check your measurements. There, I pressed it a little bit, and I bashed this in a little bit, and I have to go find some tape, put some tape on top of it. And then after, we can edge stitch this, but first, because I just like to, I'm going to put the bee butt on here. So we're going to measure the center and down, and we're going to put our little marks. You can do them on the other side if you like to, you know, see it better. It's kind of hard on the vinyl. I don't care myself one way or the other, but it's, you know, do what you like. So find the center and measure down, and that's where we'll stick the markings for this little thing. So we'll do our lines with 2 in the middle, and then we'll do the 2. And then we'll know where to poke through and poke through. What does 2 in the middle look like? There's 1, 2. So let's mark this. 1, 2. And this. So that's a little bit farther apart than the magnetic snap was. But that's where we're going to poke the holes. And in the vinyl too, we're going to poke the holes. So I've done my measurements. This is the center. And I've marked the 2 spots where I'm going to poke holes. And I have marked from this fold here, not the raw edge. Okay, so now we have to stick our dreaded holes in our vinyl. They're already in there. If you're doing snaps, you're doing them just the same. The only difference is your template is going to be different. And, you know, when you put this on, it's going to match up with the bag. Just the flap, just like this is going to match up with the flap. So let's poke these holes and get it over with. And of course, the bee, to be closed, has to be down. His butt has to be down. So when we're putting this on, make sure you get this facing the right way. His butt's got to be down. Because the rest of him will go on the flap. And so you want it to go down so it stays. So let's stick our bee with his butt facing down. And there will be no banging with this one because you don't want to break your poor little bee. Still have to find my tape. Don't have the faintest idea where it is. And some finishes you don't even want to rub because it rubs off too easily. So let's just press that in. It's really light to press anyway. You don't have to hit too hard with that one. I still have to find some tape for this side and this side. But while I'm looking, you can clip this really well so that it can be edge stitched. So you can edge stitch across here, and you can hold these together too. And you can zigzag all the way around here or baste it just depending on what your machine has. So here's our finished pocket. And that's going to get sewn on our body front. But before we do that, we have to consider, were you thinking of putting foam on your body front and back? I'm just putting it in my gusset. So you would put it in, sew it in the same way as I do it in the gusset later. Basically, I cut a piece just the same way and I zigzag around the edges. But the first thing, I'm always backtracking. The first thing we want is put our snap in. Then we'll put our foam on. Then we'll put our pocket on, our finished pocket. Now, I'm not doing the foam. I found I like the softness of it, and the foam around the gusset is good enough, but it's up to you. Maybe you've got a real flimsy cotton here and you'd like to put foam on it. So first let's put our snap in, and then you will do foam if you like, and then we'll sew our pocket on. I'm going to put this pocket piece aside. I found the center and I marked down 2.5 inches from the center, and this is just going to be a female snap on this side. I have to find my little pen. There it is. So we're going to put this down on here. And again, mark, I hope I'm not shaking the table too much. Mark the little holes. This one will have no ironing at all whatsoever because it's vinyl. Let's poke these holes in. Like I said before, it freaks me out when I have to poke a hole in vinyl. Well, it freaks me out when I have to poke a hole in anything, but the vinyl is just as bad. Just makes me crazy. So that's in there. Now can you get this in here? We can't see the holes. That's because I didn't put them in yet. And if you were a clever person, you would have double-checked your measurements before you did any hole poking, but, you know, sometimes I'm not clever. That's going to look good. I'm going to go push these over with the hammer. Now this is where the pocket's going to attach. Ooh, it's attached already. That's why we have this snap and this snap are mates to each other. This is going to be a mate with the bag flap. So don't try and put a snap in that's going to meet up with this when you're making this piece, because it's not going to work. It's not supposed to go together. I'm just going to go over and push these. And then I'm going to match this up and zigzag it around. Get the curves matched. Get this matched. And the curves. And it's supposed to be kind of pouchy like that. Okay? So it's a good thing if it doesn't fit, if it sticks out, because that helps you put your hand in it. But the curves, they should match nicely. Okay, this is sticking already. I'm going to go push these down. So here I've connected the snap. Ah, no tape again. Gotta get that tape. And you'll notice it wiggles a lot, okay? The way to know where to place it properly is the measurements in the pattern for this distance should go all the way across, okay? So if you have one side, this is an exaggeration, but if one side's 3 inches and the other side's 1 inch, you're going to mess up your pocket. Even if it's, you know, like maybe this side's 2 1/4 and this side's 2, you'll mess up your pocket. So that's why it's best to make sure this rule along here is the same. Okay, so I'm going to clip this on and zigzag around, and that'll hold it really well. So now I've got it all together. Now, another design feature is not to put these snaps on at all if you just want to have an open pocket. It's up to you, right? There's so many things on this bag that you can do or not do. Now, we have a bee butt here, so we have to stick a bee on our flap. If you don't have a bee butt and what you have is a snap, then that means this piece is going to have a snap on it too. This is the inside of your flap, and it will have to match up with the snap here. But we don't have a snap. We have a bee clasp. So if we put this on here, we're making a big mistake. So what I have to do is make my flap first. So if you're making one with a bee, make your flap first. Complete it totally. And then after it's finished, we will punch a hole through everything to get the flap having this bee work. One thing the pattern doesn't say is about the bee clasp. So if you want a magnetic snap, put it on now. Next step, which is these straps. And they go on the outside of your flap. And I'm just going to put them together with some double-sided tape and some clips, and I'm going to edge stitch them, top stitch them, get them to stick down nicely. If you're using a fabric that is not good for a raw edge, you might want to make something different for your straps. Like a cotton strap would not have a raw edge that you could use. So you'd have to make a tube or fold the edges in. Or you could even do the same as the two-tone strap. You know, and put those two-tone straps on the front of your bag flap. You just have to be careful because when you start changing fabrics, sometimes you end up changing the method of putting things together too. So this is pretty good. It's, I'm going to check if there's any overhang, because sometimes there is. And I'm going to trim that off, and then I'm just going to top stitch or edge stitch. I'll see what distance I can get in here. It looks good. And then I'll do the same with the other one, and then I can put the rivets on them. Okay, we've made our straps. We don't really have to edge stitch along the bottom. I did anyway out of habit. Just as long as you do the sides, because the bottom is going to be hidden by hardware and the top here is going to be sewn into the seam allowance. Now, if you have, depending on what kind of hardware you have, this is not a ring or D-ring or a rectangle ring, but I don't have one out right now. If you want to use a ring at the bottom, you just fold this and you could put a rivet in there. You could put a Chicago screw. You could sew it, or, well, lots of choices. Don't put a slider in it. I just don't have any D-rings out right now. But that's what you would do if you had this kind of hardware. Try and keep everything out, like leave, even if you do sew this down all the way onto one of your bag flap sides, don't sew it to the bottom, because I like folding it up here and taping it down so we can keep it out of the seam allowance when you're sewing the seam allowance. So now if you're using this kind of hardware, it depends on how wide. I think Cork would be wider than this. This is pretty thin vinyl. I folded it so there's 4 layers of vinyl in there. With Cork, you might only need the 2 layers of Cork. With fabric, if there's a seam allowance in there, you might even make it with 1. It just depends. But with this one, I'm going to glue this together, this fold, and I'm going to glue the back, and I'm going to glue the bottom, but I'm not sticking any glue on the face of the cat because I don't want to mess up that. So this is going to go on here. This is rather long, so leave some space so you can fold it up again. If you are sewing it all the way down, I'm not sewing mine all the way down. I'm just going to stick some rivets in here or Chicago screws, and that way it's going to flap around loose and look really cool. So I, right now, am going to put these cats on the back of this thing, and I think after that, we will move on to the next step. Now here we have our strap ends on. I hope you can see them. They're pretty cute. Okay, now that I've got the strap ends on, I can just baste them at the top here. I've marked where they're supposed to go. Make sure it's nice and straight. Don't get it wobbly. So after I sew this on, I'm just going to punch through all the layers and attach these. So I've got my straps basted on, and at the bottom, I've made sure that they're exactly where they should be placed. The measurements are in the pattern, and I put a little bit of double-sided tape under the end here so I can pull it off afterwards, and I've got little holes marked that I poke this through where I want to punch my hole. And I think those might be the right size. Yeah, those will be good. Just put some glue on them and then screw them down. So we've got our straps on, and they're basted down at the top here, and cute little strap ends. You might have those D-ring tabs or the rectangle rings or something, but make sure you keep everything out. So I'm running out of room here, so that you can do the seam allowance later. This is your other piece, the inside piece. Now on mine, it's got nothing on it, but on yours, it might have the snap on here so that it can hook up with the pocket. I've got nothing on mine because I'm putting on the other half of the bee, but I'm not going to put the bee on until I'm finished. So for now, I'm going to sew on some foam and cut it out of the seam allowances, and then it'll be ready. But if you're thinking your material and your foam and everything is too thick, cut a little opening where your snap was measured at, and that's going to be your hole so that you can push your bee through. So next, sew on foam. If you're using foam, you might want it on the flap, you might want it on the gusset. I'm going to put on the gusset. You might want it on the body front and the body back. I'm not putting it on the body front and back, but when we come to that, I'll remind you to do it. There you go, your inside is done. Like I said, you might have a snap half here if you don't have a bee clasp. So this is my inside. I've made the seam allowance a little bit smaller than 1/2 inch. If I went wonky, all that's going to happen is after I sew it together, I'm going to see little black stitching lines here, and I'm just going to pick out the ones I can see. Now I put these right sides together and sew them. But see how this hangs down? So I'm going to get some tape and tape these up so that they stay out of the way. So that's why I didn't want you sewing to the bottom, so you had lots of room to stick your seam allowance. So let's match these pieces up and sew them together. So we're leaving the top open because that's where we're going to turn it. So I'm not going to sew the top. I'll put these big clips here so I remember, and I'm just going to sew everywhere else, all the way around the curves carefully and everything like that. Match everything up. 1, 2, 3. So there's our flap. Now, like I said before, if you used a snap, you'd have the snap here, and that's how it would close. I am not using a snap, I'm using the bee. So the bee will go in the same position as the snap, and it's going to go through all these layers, and I guess that's the only thing left to do. I did top stitch. When you're top stitching, it's easier to go on these curves, and of course the straight. Going around these curves, I just did 2 stitches at a time, and then I turned, and then I did another 2. And I've got a foot that's got a guide on it for 1/4 inch, and you don't watch the needle, you watch the foot and make sure the foot is going along the edge. So that's how I went around. I don't know what else I could say, but with the foam in there and the top stitching, you end up with almost cording on there, and that was pretty cool. I like that. So this is almost finished except for installing this. Now this is our key holder strap. We're going to put the right sides together and sew it with 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that makes a 1 inch wide strap. Of course, this way you have to turn it, so maybe you might have other ways to make a 1 inch strap that you like better, and go for it. You know, it's a pattern where you're free to choose all the design pieces that you want. I'm going to do this because I can turn it, no problem, and I'll stick with what the pattern says. Now it's sewn. Some people press it this way, and then after they move it that way so that they can get the seam in the center. I am just going to go over and press it with the seam in the center and keep my fingers crossed that I don't go too wonky. But as I'm pressing it, I am going to tuck in the ends so that I don't have any raw ends, especially with this stuff. Look how it frays. But I can tuck that inside and press it inside. And then that way it's going to make sure that it doesn't have any raw ends on it. And then when I come back, I can top stitch all around it. And here's our little key holder strap. There's thread everywhere. And it's pressed and it's tucked on the ends. Let's stick a little hook on the end now. And, you know, if you want to use a rivet, you can, but I'm just going to sew a little box and hold it down. And then we can put it aside. We don't quite need it yet. Now, these are our D-ring tabs. And I'm not going to use them. This time I'm going to try using these strap anchors. Just on the side, I'm going to attach them to the gussets. And I'll show you how to do that later. But if you want to use D-ring tabs, the only thing you have to do is take the piece that we have and press the ends in to meet. I like running some ribbon up because I've had cork and everything, you know, quilting cotton, everything wear out. And sometimes the only thing holding it is the little ribbon that's left inside. This is not a D-ring. This is a slider, but again, I don't have the things. So that's how you would put it on. I would edge stitch down to hold these edges down. And then put it on here, slide it on here. Just like the pattern says, it's pretty easy. And then sew a little line of stitching across here to hold it and put it aside for later. Now, that's if you want to use these. If you don't want to use these, I'll show you how to do some strap anchors later. So here's my flap finished with my little kitty cats on it. And I have to put this on now. My son pointed out to me that if I'm making a cat bag, I shouldn't have a bee clasp on it, and he's probably right, but I don't care. I'm going to put this on in the exact same spot the snap is supposed to go on, so it's centered, and I don't know, the pattern says how much up from the bottom. So I'm just going to measure that spot, and we have to go through all these layers. If you're just doing a magnetic snap, you just put it on the back, right? And you leave the front plain like this. When you're doing this, you have to poke a hole all the way through, and that's just frightfully scary for me, because then, of course, this little bee butt that's already on here can go through all the layers and through here, and we can push his butt down, and he closes. It doesn't matter what kind of a lock you're putting on your bag. They're all done pretty much the same, I've found. I'm going to get my little screwdriver and unscrew these and hopefully not lose them and measure out where my little hole is supposed to go. So I've done my little line where the base of this is supposed to go, and I'll make sure that's on the line. And I'm going to draw where the hole is. And there has to be a hole for the screws and a hole for the bee butt to come through. Oh, we have a little face sitting there because this is going to sit on top here. So we have to poke a hole through for the bee butt and for the screws that are holding the two pieces together. This is going to go on the back and this is going to go on the front. And it's not as easy to put holes in the fabric than it is if you're using cork or vinyl or something. I find it very difficult to stick it through fabric. But I still want to start it with the punch. And I've got an awl here. I'm going to make this hole with. Now after punching this hole really small, and I poke the awl through, and this hole, and the round hole in the middle, I put some fray check on it, and I cut off the extra little hairs that are sticking out there. If you've got a really heavy stabilizer inside or an interfacing or something, like this foam, you might want to leave a square of it blank and put something lighter there or put nothing there, it's just going to make it harder for you to poke a hole through. This one wasn't too bad. So now I'm going to put this on one side and put this on the other side. And I'm going to get some glue to help glue them together, and then I can screw them together too. So where we finished, I put a little bit of glue on the back to help it stay. And I also put some glue in the screw holes. And then after, when we just put it in, if we've got no threads in the way, then it'll go through nicely. And if you do have threads in the way, just make sure that you cut them out. And there's your bee. So how did that go? No mishaps? No dropped sandwiches? Now we've got our two pieces, our lining and our outer layers, and we're going to stick them together. If you have any questions, be sure and ask, and follow along, like, so you can catch the next one. I think the third one is probably the last one. We'll finish everything up in the third one. And so, you know, make sure you ask questions, share your photos in the Lányos Handmade Pattern Party group. And I think that's all I have to say right now. So let's get on with day 3 now.